On April 9, 2010, my father was diagnosed with small cell lung cancer. He was living in Oklahoma at the time. My siblings and I all went down to his house. We had lost our mom to cancer and we wanted to be close by. What we didn't know at first was that small cell lung cancer is the most responsive to treatment. 85 to 95% of people respond to treatment, and 50% live more than 2 years, according to the research that I've looked up. We got to Oklahoma and we were going to his treatments with him, and everything seemed to be fine. We were trying to move forward as a family. My father had been married to a woman that we adored for over 10 years, and something became amiss. On April 25th, my father met with an attorney friend of his, he and my stepmother, to write a new will as well. We thought he was going to write a new will. What we learned was that the attorney explained to them how wills work in the state of Oklahoma. In the state of Oklahoma, if my father died intestate, 50% of his assets would go to his children. If he died with a will and his children contested the will and won, the same thing would happen. My parents owned a home in Arkansas. They had planned to move to. They were going to try to sell the home in Oklahoma. My father spoke to the realtor, asked the realtor to take the house off the market until he completed his treatment, and then they would put the house back on the market. Upon learning the Oklahoma law about wills, my stepmother demanded that they move to Arkansas immediately. My father finished his third treatment with his doctor in Oklahoma, where my sister Doris and I were present, and at that last meeting with his doctor, he looked at the floor and he said, "So tell me, am I going to live?" The doctor said, "Yeah, you're going to live. Cancer is not something we cure, we treat cancer, but yeah, you're going to live." My sister and I were ecstatic, my father was ecstatic. My sister and I went outside, called our other three siblings to let them know what had been said, and that was the 11th of June. On the 15th, my father and stepmother signed the paperwork to sell their house, and on the 17th of June they moved to Arkansas. Upon moving to Arkansas, suddenly we weren't welcome in my father's home. My father was the kind of guy that when the family would come home for a holiday, he would demand that we all stayed at his house. Now there were 5 children, 10 grandchildren or more, and we all had to stay in his house. And suddenly, for the first time in our lives, we were no longer welcome in his home. My sister Shirley moved to Arkansas. She brought a trailer there to stay there so she could be close by. She could let everybody know what was happening, keep us all abreast. My sister Carolyn came back and stayed a lot. Doris lived in Oklahoma, so she was close enough to come for weekends. And then Marilyn and I came when we could. Once they got to Arkansas, my stepmother stopped giving my father his medication appropriately. I called the doctor's office repeatedly, telling them that I knew it wasn't their job to babysit my parents, but if they could just please go over his medication dispensing with her, because she would either give him too much medication or she wouldn't give him any medication at all. It was morphine is what we were talking about. She was leaving him in tremendous pain, or she would drug him so heavily he couldn't do anything, he would drool. She had me removed from the call list. I was no longer able to speak to anybody at the doctor's office. They wouldn't accept my calls. And finally, my father put me back on the call list. Because of all of this, my father and I had a tremendous fight. My father and I had a tremendous fight. I really felt like he was pushing his children aside. What I didn't know at the time, and in my short-sightedness, was the pressure that was being put on him. My father's mother died when he was 8 years old. His father had been institutionalized. So basically he was kind of orphaned, he was abandoned. This was in 1940, the Depression, and my father, when he reunited with his father, didn't really have a relationship with him anymore. When his father died in a nursing home, which was my father's biggest fear. What I didn't know was that my stepmother was pressuring him. She was threatening to leave him. She was threatening to put him in a nursing home. She was using every ounce of pressure she could to force him to keep his children out of his life, out of her life, and out of her way. The day that my father called my sisters over and begged his wife to be there as well, and told her that he could no longer live without his children, was the day that she called a new attorney to write a will in the state of Arkansas. After being put back on the call list, I called again repeatedly. My sister Marilyn came up with the idea of a way to get the morphine out of my stepmother's hands. She would put the morphine in her purse so no one could get to it. Marilyn had the idea of putting it into shot distribution. So I called the doctor's office and spoke to the nurse, and I really felt like I had hit a brick wall. She had no interest in listening to what I had to say. She told me that no one in the entire facility was on shots for morphine. And I tried to explain to her that I wasn't trying to tell them how to do their job. I was just trying to resolve a problem without making anyone angry. Prior to calling her, I had spoken to my father and told him that I thought I figured out a way to get his medication to him on time, and told him I had to call the doctor and asked if he was okay with that. He said he was fine with it as long as it didn't make anyone upset. Do you get my drift? He said. And I said, I think that we'll be okay, Dad. After I hung up with the nurse, I didn't know until later that she called my stepmother and told my stepmother everything I said. My sister Shirley had to defend my father after that phone call. In the end, at this point, we all knew that my dad wasn't going to live. The doctor in Oklahoma had said he was. Our stepmother kept him out of treatment for 7.5 weeks. Even though the doctor's office said that they would put her with a different doctor until his doctor came off vacation, she didn't want that. So we knew our dad wasn't going to live. So our only job was to keep him out of pain. When we were present, we would talk with him, we would sing. We did as much as we could. What was interesting to me was when my dad died, we were all grieving, and my stepmother picked out his clothes for the funeral. That night, she and her son cleared everything that belonged to my father out of that house. It was rather painful.